You've seen it, haven't you? The trembling lip, the sudden wetness in her eye, the way silence wraps itself around a sob like velvet around a blade. It doesn't wound you with sharpness, it dissolves you. You were not attacked, you were surrendered to, and still, you lost. There is a moment, quiet and cruel, when her tears arrive not as feeling, but as decision, a decision you were never part of. You believed in her fragility. You thought you were witnessing emotion, but emotion does not wait for the perfect pause. Emotion does not glance at the mirror first. No, this was something colder, something practiced. You remember the first time you doubted, not the tears but the space around them, the immaculate timing, the way they appeared only after your withdrawal, never before. She wept not in solitude, but in theater, and you stayed, not out of love, but because her ruin had given you a role. And so you ask, was it ever grief, or was it simply gravity, her gravity, and your fall? You always believed sorrow was something sacred. You thought it came unbidden, like a storm or a wound, impossible to fake, holy in its ache. So when she wept, you paused. When she trembled, you withdrew your anger, your will, yourself. Her pain made her untouchable, and you obeyed. But slowly, something colder crept into your gut. Not rage, not resentment, but a quiet suspicion. Her tears fell not during the silence, not in the middle of the night when no one watched, but in the spaces where your doubt lived, where your disobedience had begun to stir. Her sadness was not a wound, it was a curtain, and behind it, something else watched you. You remember the look, the way her eyes shimmered just before your words reached their peak. The moment she sensed the shift in you, the independence, the recoil. That was when the flood came. That was when she crumbled not out of despair, but precision. And you saw it, didn't you? You saw the elegance of her collapse. It had rhythm. It had design. She was not consumed by pain. She wielded it, like silk turned to wire. She coiled fragility into a leash. And you, noble fool, mistook it for innocence. You didn't walk away. You folded, not because you were wrong, but because she appeared weaker. That's the trap, isn't it? The illusion that power only wears steel, that control must bark commands, raise voices, tower over. You never realized how obediently men kneel when power cries, how your conscience bends faster than your pride. You were taught that violence is masculine and tears are helpless, but her tears were weapons, and you were never the attacker, only the captured. She never said the words. She didn't need to. Her silence was sculpted to suggest abandonment. Her breath caught at the exact point where your guilt might spike. Her gaze fell to the floor when you needed clarity, not because she had none, but because she knew you would give her yours. She wore sorrow the way a priestess wears robes, not because she felt unworthy, but because she knew you'd worship, and you did. Again. What were you really feeling? Then pity, compassion, or something stranger, the thrill of being necessary. She made you her savior, then reminded you she never asked to be saved. That was her dance. She withdrew and collapsed simultaneously, making you chase the shadow of her pain while she remained still. The stillness was part of the performance. Stillness evokes projection. You filled in the rest. You imagined histories. You imagined heartbreak. You imagined her as the victim. She never corrected you. And when you tried to speak, really speak, to lift the curtain, to confront the fog, she cried. Not because the truth hurt, but because the truth unmasked her. Tears are the oldest escape, and she used them not to exit the scene, but to trap you inside it. You had just begun to question the script when she collapsed back into her role. The misunderstood, the wounded, the one who only ever loved too much. You were never fighting her. You were fighting the weight of your own imagined cruelty. You were accused by implication. She never said you hurt me. She said nothing. But her silence accused louder than any words could. That's how emotional gravity works. It doesn't drag you with force. It tilts your moral compass. And every time you tried to stand, you found yourself doubting the ground. Was she crying because of you or because she knew it would stop you? The distinction is everything. But you were trained not to look, not to ask, only to feel. And how convenient for her a power that required no assertion, no responsibility, just a moment, a sigh, a tear. You carried the burden of both your intention and her reaction, and she remained the weeper. The weeper is always blameless, until you realize that not all tears fall from grief. Some fall from calculation. Some are not water at all. They are mirrors. And what you saw in them was not her soul, but your own illusion, the noble man who could not walk away from weakness. You thought leaving would make you cruel, but you never asked what staying was making of you. You never noticed how each episode erased your will, how you began to measure your words, not for truth, but for impact. You didn't want to trigger the flood again. You began to censor, to tiptoe, to wait for her emotion before speaking yours. That is not compassion. That is captivity. You became her audience, and she her own playwright. What if I told you her sadness was not false but functional, that it served a purpose beyond grief? Schopenhauer knew not all suffering is innocent. Some is theatrical, some is chosen because it works. And you, sentimental creature, mistook every trembling voice for virtue. But virtue does not manipulate. Virtue does not cry only when seen. Virtue does not fold conveniently at the moment you speak your truth. Her fragility was not her prison, it was yours. And the cruelest part, you still wonder if she ever really loved you. You still wonder if the tears were sometimes real. You still want to believe she just didn't know better. That's the last chain the one made of longing. Because part of you still wants to save her, but what if she never needed saving? What if she only needed a mirror? And what if that mirror was you? So now you sit in the ruins of your own patience, and it dawns she never had to shout. She never had to demand. She never had to strike. She simply wept, and you dropped your sword, again and again and again. You called it empathy, you called it decency, but she called it something else. She called it control. She does not raise her voice. She raises the stakes, not with anger, but with fragility. She knows the stage well, its soft lighting, its emotional acoustics, the places where men forget their lines and fall into silence. She does not overpower. She unravels, slowly, delicately, like fabric slipping from a shoulder. She lets you see her unraveling, and you believe it is your fault. You see mascara trembling on her lashes, and you forget why you were angry. Her voice falters not in chaos, but in choreography. It is not hysteria, it is design. The more she breaks, the more you disappear. You don't see it at first, because you think suffering cannot be a weapon. But she knows better. She knows that beauty dies slowly, and men die faster in its name. She plays the part of the beautiful victim, and you forget there was ever a script. You become the scene partner who improvises obedience. You offer forgiveness before accusation. You offer understanding before she speaks. You sit beside her on the floor, but she never fell. She descended, voluntarily. You start to notice the patterns, not in what she says, but in what she withholds. Her silence arrives with precision just after you assert yourself. You say something difficult, something true, and her eyes glass over. She doesn't speak, she doesn't rebut, she just looks down, as if your truth wounded her, as if clarity itself is cruelty. She has no counter-argument, she doesn't need one. Her hurt is the argument, her sadness is the moral, and you who dared to speak become the villain in her fable. It is always a fable, a play she rewrites after each act, until your character no longer resembles you. You find your voice quoted back in her tone, rewritten, softened, made monstrous. You didn't yell, but in her version, you did. You didn't betray, but in her memory, you left her trembling. You didn't threaten, but in her eyes, you became danger. Not because you were cruel, but because you stopped apologizing, because you stopped kneeling. She does not seek dominance. She seeks devotion, and devotion demands a shrine not of gold, but of guilt. Your guilt, your endless willingness to return, to hold her while she weeps, to promise once more that you'll be careful with your words, with your presence, with your absence. She does not ask for power in the masculine form. She wants power to feel like salvation, and you want to be her savior. That is the contract. She suffers, you kneel. She suffers more, you disappear. And the irony, the more you give, the more she doubts you. Not because you failed, but because your empathy betrays your weakness. She does not love the man who bends. She tests him. She does not trust the man who stays despite accusation. She loses respect for him. You become the plaything she breaks for meaning, and still you stay, because she taught you that love looks like endurance. But love that requires your silence is not love. It is theater, and in this theater, only one role is sacred: the victim. The one who bleeds without consequence. The one who weeps without evidence. The one who can never be accused, only consoled. Her pain is a sovereign nation. You must present your passport of guilt before entering. You must surrender your defenses, your doubts, your spine. And if you dare question the performance, if you name the manipulation, she gasps. Betrayed. The actress calls foul. The curtain drops. You are exiled. You see now, don't you? The stage was never neutral. Every step you took was pre-lit. Every word you spoke echoed through her script. You were not speaking freely. You were reciting lines. Lines that fed her narrative. Lines that confirmed her sorrow. And when you forgot your cue, when you spoke as a man, not a character, the lights dimmed, the tears returned, the scene reset. She doesn't need to be cruel. She only needs to appear hurt. That is her fortress. And your kindness, your capacity to care is the siege engine that breaks you. Schopenhauer saw this well. The one who does not demand pity receives none. The one who demands it endlessly, through softness, through tragedy, through performance, she becomes untouchable. She becomes adored. But the danger is not just her, it is what she awakens in you. The savior, the protector, the dreamer who believes he can fix what she does not want fixed. She does not want healing. Healing would mean stepping off the stage. Healing would mean giving up the power of tears. And she is addicted not to love, but to its theater. So you remain, not because you are fooled, but because you are flattered. Her pain makes you feel like a man, and her silence makes you feel like a monster. You swing between the two until your own identity dissolves. You are either her redeemer or her destroyer, but never yourself. She does not see you. She sees only her audience. And yet, the cruel genius of it all, she believes herself. Her tears are real to her. Her sadness is authentic in her mind. That is what makes it dangerous. It is not a lie. It is a performance she believes in. She is both actress and audience, both victim and judge. She grieves for the role she plays, and you feel guilty for not grieving with her. Even when you leave, she follows you in memory. You replay the scenes. You wonder if you were too harsh. You wonder if you failed her. You wonder if she really needed you. But what she needed was not you. It was your surrender, your silence, your consent to her script. And when you stopped giving it, you became her enemy. Now the curtain is down, but the stage remains inside you. Her voice still echoes when another woman cries. Her face appears in dreams when you assert yourself. You flinch, not from guilt, but from conditioning. You have been trained, not in love, but in obedience. And her performance lingers like a scent, sweet, sorrowful, clinging to your conscience. You may never see her again, but you will recognize the role. You will recognize the entrance cue, the trembling voice, the turned face, the story whispered, not for healing, but for power. You will feel the hook pulling again, and this time, maybe, you won't step on stage, because the victim is not always powerless. Sometimes she chooses her suffering, and sometimes she chooses it because it works. And you, once noble, once tender, were not her savior. You were her script. You saw her pain, but you never questioned why it always bloomed in response to your strength. You mistook reaction for reality. You thought tears were the final truth. That sorrow was self-evident, but sorrow too can be engineered. And her performance was not born from malice, it was born from instinct. She understood what you did not, that in the face of male conviction, the most effective weapon is collapse, not resistance, not rage, but ruin, a soft, deliberate ruin. She didn't shout, she fell, and in falling, she made you choose not between her and the truth, but between her and yourself. You didn't know how often you'd do it, how many times you'd betray your voice to rescue hers, how often you'd dim your clarity to cradle her confusion, how subtly the trade was made, because you didn't lose all at once. You gave in drops, one pause here, one apology there, one hesitation, one edit, one moment of silence because her eyes were wet. You thought you were being kind, but she was never silent when you cried. She didn't flinch when you bled. You remember, don't you? The day your chest cracked open and she watched not with horror, not with awe, but with a quiet, distracted judgment, as if your pain was inconvenient, as if your wounds were loud, and still you returned, because you needed to believe she cared, because the idea that her sorrow was a method, not a mirror, would collapse the entire myth you built around her. You called her deep, you called her misunderstood, but she was never hidden, she was exposed, always. You simply chose to see what kept you near. That is the cruelty of projection. It's not that they deceive you, it's that you assist them. She cried, and you called it truth. She withered, and you knelt. But what she offered you was not truth. It was a reflection, a performance shaped not by her soul, but by your need to feel needed. She was what you could save, and the moment you stopped trying, she stopped shining. You became her threat not because you hurt her, but because you saw her. It was in that moment, that flicker of lucidity, that the mirror shifted. You realized it had never shown you her. It had shown you yourself, bent and bound by your idea of virtue. You were not seeing a woman. You were seeing the emotional theater your conscience could not resist. Her tears weren't daggers. They were invitations to guilt, to sacrifice, to submission. She cried, and in your heart, you became her debtor. This is the silent architecture of emotional power. It does not demand, it does not conquer. It simply implies that you are dangerous, and then makes you prove otherwise endlessly. You do not leave because she cries. You do not speak because she trembles. You do not dare accuse her of control, because control is loud and cruel, and she is soft and suffering. But this is precisely why she wins. Do you understand now that emotion can be a system? That tears, when timed, can enslave. That silence, when strategic, can erase you. And she, whether knowingly or not, learned that sadness is more persuasive than logic. That collapse is more effective than confrontation, and most importantly, that if you are a good man, she can use that goodness against you. You thought cruelty would break you, but what broke you was mercy, your own mercy. You forgave her again and again, not because she earned it, but because she appeared to need it. Her appearance was always the key, not her truth. Her appearance. That is the essence of the performance. She never had to be right. She only had to appear wronged. And you, who wanted to love deeply, never realized how deeply you were being rewritten, not by dominance, but by distortion. Her pain was not a window, it was a veil. You stared into it for years, hoping for revelation, but all you found was yourself diminished, cautious, edited. You who once spoke with fire, now whispered with fear. You who once stood tall, now bent to every pause in her voice. And even when you left, she lingered, in the next woman's sigh, in the next apology you gave too quickly, in the way you flinched when someone told you they were hurt without saying how. You learned to brace for tears like storms, not because you feared the flood, but because you knew you'd hand her the umbrella and stand wet beside her. You were never afraid of her emotions. You were afraid of who you became in their presence, a man too aware of his weight, a man too responsible for someone else's shadow, a man who had been made the villain in a play he never auditioned for. And yet, what if she didn't know? What if the performance was unconscious? What if her tears were trained by past rewards? Does that absolve her? Or does it make the danger even deeper, because it means she'll do it again, with someone else, with the same pattern, the same script? You want to forgive, but even forgiveness has become suspicious now, because you've seen how easily sorrow can be rehearsed, how efficiently empathy can be harvested. So you begin to ask harder questions. You begin to wonder what kind of woman never apologizes but always suffers. What kind of woman breaks down only when you rise? What kind of woman listens only to be wounded? And suddenly, the answers don't feel poetic. They feel cold, brutal, true. You were her audience. You were her conscience. You were her confessional, but never her equal. Equality does not exist where pain is currency. And she was rich in sadness. Her wealth of tears bought your silence, your care, your soul. And when you had nothing left to spend, she called you cruel. Now, the mirror remains. It watches, not with eyes, but with memory. It remembers the moments you silenced your truth for her comfort. It remembers the times you walked backward into guilt because her sadness filled the room like perfume, invisible, choking, exquisite. And it waits. It waits to see if you will do it again. Because here is the final cruelty. She was never the lie. You were. You lied to yourself about what love is. You lied about what suffering means. You lied about what makes a woman worthy. You thought pain made her deep. But depth is not measured in tears. Depth is measured in responsibility. And she took none. She will cry again, somewhere, for someone, and they too will pause, they will wonder, they will bend, unless they see the mirror before them, unless they remember that not every tear is truth, that not every silence is sacred, that sometimes sorrow is performance, and performance is power, and you will recognize it. You will feel the pull, you will hear the cue, but this time, perhaps, you will not step forward, you will not kneel, you will not rewrite yourself to rescue the illusion. You will stand, not as an audience, but as a man unmirrored, and you will walk away, not from her, but from the story that made her holy. There is a single teardrop on the floor. It has no source, no heat, no memory, just the shimmer of something rehearsed. You step over it, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Somewhere behind you, the curtain sways. No applause, no final bow, just silence. Not the silence she used to accuse you, not the silence you once filled with explanations. A new silence, one that does not beg or bend, one that watches, one that waits, and in it, something unspoken. What if you were never supposed to catch her? What if she never wanted to be caught? What if her tears were not a fall, but a signal to someone else? Not you. You were never in the story, only in the scene.